Welcome to Voices United and to this hour of thinking about the resilient music ministry. Our own Jessica Irish from Messiah United Methodist Church in Virginia has teamed up with Karen Marrolli from Centrall United Methodist in New Mexico and Sarah Bereza, blogger, author, and director at First Congregational Church in Missouri, to discuss church choirs specifically and how we can weather this storm and keep our churches filled with music. We welcome them all, and we welcome you to join in their discussion.
Hey, DC Voices United. Welcome to our session on resiliency in music ministry. I'm going to be hosting a panel discussion. I'm Jessica Irish, and I'm Director of Music Ministries at Messiah United Methodist Church in Springfield, Virginia. I also had the privilege of teaching high school and middle school choral music for Fairfax County for about 17 years. So I have a lot of colleagues in the schools as well, where I know resiliency is also a topic of note. I'm here today. I'm very excited to share this discussion with Sarah Bariza and with Karen Marrolli. And I thought I would give them just a moment to introduce themselves. Sarah, welcome.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. I'm Sarah Bereza. I'm the Minister of Music at the First Congregational Church of St. Louis. So I'm here in St. Louis, Missouri. And I do a lot of work online in addition to my work in the church. I produce a podcast, Music and the Church with Sarah Bereza, which has all things music related to the church, a lot of scholarship and practitioner work, and another podcast, Getting to Nimble, which is specifically for church staff.
Great. Karen, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Marrolli. I'm the Director of Music Ministries at Centrall United Methodist Church in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so what I do there under normal circumstances is I direct adult chancel choir, a symphonia. I work with children's music, and just there's a handbell choir there that I indirectly supervise, I guess. And I also do things with composing. I'm a published composer through ECS Publishing Group. I also publish some things independently on my website. So I'm very into composing vocal music and singer-songwriter type stuff and choral things.
Great. Well, I'm just really glad both of you agreed to join me today. And I wanted to share a little bit about what is resiliency, just to sort of get a baseline for the beginning of our discussion. And I actually looked on the American Psychological Association website and read a little bit about how they define it. And they say it is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. And as I read that, I thought, check, 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 right? I think that describes the present environment very well. And what I thought it was also interesting about that article is it says that as much as resilience involves the process of bouncing back or adapting, it can also involve profound personal growth. So I think that's what we're here today to discuss. When I think about the current situation in music ministry and all the limitations that we have and the challenges that we have, I think it is ultimately our ability to reframe how we think about that situation so that we can move forward that's going to keep us being effective in our ministry. And so with that, I wanted to start with the question, and I'm going to pose it to either of you who wants to comment. What do you think resiliency looks like in music ministry?
Well, the camera's on me. So for me, resiliency, it seems to be synonymous with innovation right now. So all of the sudden, everything that you normally would do with a choir or a large group of people, with a large congregation, just kind of got tossed out the window. So being resilient is kind of being able to change course and say, okay, well, we can't do this right now, so what can we do? And and what can we do in the short term, which is what we're dealing with right now, but then also what may we be able to do in the long term, and thinking ahead, just based on what we know from evolving science and what we think that we're going to find out. So really innovating and thinking outside the box and doing things in ways that we wouldn't normally do off the bat.
To me, so much of this is about mindset, like having a mindset that says, yes, I'm willing to try something new. Yes, I'll take the turn in the road that came up that I wasn't expecting, but this is where I am right now, and I'm going to grow with this new circumstance, instead of shutting down and saying, well, this isn't what I wanted, I'm done.
Right.
A really different mindset that allows you to be resilient.
Right. And, I was just thinking in my music ministry, and I'm sure you share this, music is the vehicle that we predominantly use to connect with the people who participate in the music ministry, to share God's love, to share the Spirit with the congregation, to help people feel closer to each other and to the Spirit. And so because of that, I try to put people first, even though I want the music to be really good. I mean, I want to have a standard of excellence. And so that's always been a balancing act for me. But now, so during this time, I'm kind of like, and the music part. I mean, to a degree, it's kind of like, what can I do for my people? What can I do that's going to, I guess I'm giving myself permission to define success differently than I did in the past. So let's speak to that a little bit. How are you defining success for yourselves during this time?
I mean, I've always thought of my role as a music minister. I mean, I think of it as music minister. So there's a sort of a pastoral component to it there. It's not just the idea that maybe is aligned with some other paths of music making, where it's you make everything as pristine as possible and you have a big concert and people throw flowers. But that there is always also, because I've done a lot of community chorus stuff as well, there's always an interpersonal component. But I think especially right now, people are in crisis. And it's an especially big crisis. I think it was Terry Johnson in the ACDA sort of follow-up of the document that they produced with prescriptions for how things may go in the fall, mentioned how traumatizing this is, I think, especially to church music singers, because they got hooked on it in high school and they're 75 years old and they're still doing it, and how important this is and how difficult that it must be for them to be separated from it. So right now, I mean, I am balancing the music thing with worship, between providing excellent music for worship in a different form, whether it be through soloists, through the use of my organist, through the use of guest soloists, through the use of virtual choir. I did a virtual choir video that's sort of around the bend from what people normally do. Whether it's writing new content that is appropriate to the COVID situation in various ways, either the subject matter or the way that it's performed, the way that it's given. But also with my choir, we meet every week online on Zoom, and we just meet. And a lot of the time, they're really just getting to see each other. And they're talking about what's going on. Well, how are you dealing with this? And, how is this going? And what have you heard about this? We do prayer concerns. They have a time where they pray for everybody. And some of it is where I keep them up to date on what's happening with the situation as far as the evolution of the science on singing, and does it impact, how much does it impact the spread, how much could it impact, what does this mean for us in the fall, what could the fall look like? So it's a very sort of hybrid approach in a more obvious way, I guess, than it normally is. You probably find this with dealing with that you're a caretaker in a much more profound way, I think, for your singers all the time, but especially right now. and just letting them talk to each other about the struggles they're going through and what scares them.
Yeah.
Karen, what I'm hearing and what you're saying resonates so much with what I'm doing. And what I'm hearing especially is connections. Mm-hmm. And that so much of what we're doing right now, maybe in a way that's, I don't know if it's more than what we did before, or maybe I just didn't see this as a connection, but I'm connecting people with each other. I'm connecting the choir or, various instrumentalists and musicians with the congregation. We're all connecting with God through the music that we're making, through the community that we're having. And so when I think about like musical quality or musical standards, if I'm thinking about what makes music right now excellent or any of those kinds of things that we would want, to me, it has to come down to how is this serving that purpose of connection? How is this helping people in the choir connect with each other? These Zoom calls, man, people tell me this is an oasis in their week, that Zoom call that we have. And right now in the summer, we're not doing music. We'll presumably we'll still be doing Zoom calls in the fall. We'll be doing some vocalizing, and we can get into that later, what the plans are. But it's really about connecting people with each other. And when I think about why am I putting all the work into these virtual choir videos that are a lot of work to do and not necessarily musically satisfying really for anyone except people seeing the final product? Why? Because connection, because I want people in the congregation to see the choir members' faces. I want people in the choir to be seeing each other. We need to be seeing each other's faces. We need that right now, especially right now. And it's so much about that connection there.
So you said the virtual choir word, right? And I know, and I know, the purpose of this discussion is not to get into the technical how to do that. There are other resources during this conference that can help you with that. However, but I just want to say, talking about innovating and personal growth, I had never edited audio or video in my life before this whole situation. And it became pretty clear about the third time I used the acapella app that wasn't going to do it for me. I spent so much time trying to troubleshoot people over the phone how to use the app and, things like that. So it became clear to me, I guess what I'm saying early on is that I needed to get in the game. I needed to learn how. And so, I'd never used a Mac before. I bought the nice Mac I could afford on my church budget. And I purchased, Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro. And I just dove in with the online tutorials, friends I knew. I was screen sharing so they could show me how to do everything. And, it was a learning curve, but I feel pretty competent now. And I don't know how I would do my job presently if I hadn't learned how to do that, because it's not just become about virtual choir. It could be about editing a soloist with an accompanist together, just something as simple as that. And so I guess what I'm saying is I was a little intimidated by all of that, but I think I recognize the reality of my situation. As far as virtual choir, you can do it on a smaller scale. It doesn't have to be the thing that takes over your life that you spend 60 to 80 hours or whatever working on.
Not what I'm doing. No way.
Yeah. And I know both of you have done sort of the maybe a different take on virtual choir. So, Karen, can you tell us what you've done with that medium?
Mm-hmm. So what I did was I sort of polled my choir. They weren't particularly interested in being stars and doing the camera picture-in-picture thing. Mm-hmm. We have everybody in the Brady Bunch boxes. But I said it could be something as simple as you singing a hymn, like you're leading the hymn in worship. And I can put pictures to it or video or things like that. So there are resources on the internet for stock video. Or talk about innovation. I have already was thinking before this, and I'm thinking again that part of my job probably means going out and shooting video, atmospheric video that can be used in future projects or things like that. So just something else for you to think about when you're thinking about all the new skill sets that you might need to pick up. But I was pretty fortunate in that I at least have some experience with audio editing because I've done some of my own self-recording for singer-songwriter materials. So I already have Pro Tools at my disposal that I could use and knew my way around it. So the audio editing part really wasn't that difficult for me, but I feel for people that have never done it before because that is such a steep learning curve. I mean, that's something that, and I see the discussions online of people saying, what do I do? What do I do? Because we've never had to think about doing choir in this way before. But basically, putting that recording together and with some video of different things. And the song that we chose was Joyful, Joyful, because I knew that could be used in various places as a hymn of praise or as a response to something. And they managed to do 2 verses unison, first and last unison, and the second and third in parts. I said, go for it if you think you can. And they all did it. So I gave them a reference track. I just had a piano track of the piece. I gave them very specific instructions on what I wanted them to do, how I wanted them to do it, that you have to use one device to play the track with the headphones in, and then you record on a second device, so giving them very clear instructions and all of that kind of stuff. But we didn't do the picture-in-picture and all. It was them singing to pictures of, chanting birds and flowing fountains. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen some really nice videos where people have taken a hymn that they already had a recording of from a past church service, and it's their choir, an anthem or a hymn or something. And rather than, reinvent the wheel, they just said, hey, could you hold up some lyrics? And can you film yourself holding up some lyrics? And I'll just show you doing that and I thought, well, that's great,
cool.
Because then if they're not confident in their solo singing and don't want to be sort of scrutinized in a virtual choir setting, that's another way that they can contribute and not even really have to sing. But I think in the online services that we've had, people love to see each other's faces. That's really, getting back to connection. And Sarah, I know you did something that I don't remember if it was a Facebook post you did or something, but you said this is an easier way of doing a virtual choir or a simplified way. So talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I've been doing, the audio editing, and fortunately I also had some, produce a couple podcasts. So I've done not so much music editing, but I've done a lot of audio editing in the past. So that learning curve, thank God, wasn't so steep. But I've been using Zoom to make lip sync videos, basically. So I'll play the audio and we lip sync together. And it's really, Sunday morning during our choir rehearsal time, except during the summer now, it's become our just highs and lows of the week. How are you doing time? And we'll lip sync to the video. And I don't produce the videos. One of my colleagues does that. Thankfully, we're splitting up the workload here. And it's so much easier for her to say, sure, I can do this in addition to producing our very produced Sunday morning worship service that we do. It makes it so that we can actually feel like we can. And I'll send a link to Jessica so that this will be in the thing, because I wrote along like, here's how to do this. It's a lot easier than a lot of these. That said, thinking about resilience and just like kind of dreaming up, like, well, what could we do? What can we do now that we couldn't in the past? And this week we're doing a choir alumni video and recording. And so I've emailed like 20 different people. Only like 5 of them have said yes. But, people who've been in the choir in the past, I don't even know most of these folks. And hey, do you want to join in? You can send in a video. You can join our Zoom call. Send me a recording. We could never do that normally. These people are across the whole. I think they're all in the United States. But okay, we can do this kind of thing that we couldn't in the past. Let's use this time right now, this very weird time, and treat it as an opportunity for, for connecting with other people, or like Karen in your case, exploring nature and bringing in that kind of word painting with the music. It's like text setting, but even more text setting. It's so meta right there. And it's like, well, why not take this opportunity? Here we are. And it's not what I would normally be wanting to do in the summer of 2020, but hey, here we are. And let's take that opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And, hinging off of what you just said, of what makes it, what's possible now that maybe we either wouldn't have thought was possible or wouldn't have thought to do, is that I actually have a couple of people, either former singers from groups that I conducted in places other than Albuquerque, or one young lady that I've never actually met, but we're friends on Facebook because she's sung some of my music, and she friended me, and they said, hey, can we be part of your virtual choir? And I said, well, sure, why not? So, we can have the Central United Methodist Church Chancel Choir and friends. Now, normally you wouldn't be able to have someone from Santa Fe, buzz into an Albuquerque choir, or someone who's in Pennsylvania. But that kind of stuff is possible through the situation. So that's sort of interesting.
Yeah, the ability to pull in people who are previously involved or who otherwise normally wouldn't be able to be involved because of circumstances, like maybe, your friend who's the director of music at another church will be in your virtual choir if you'll be in theirs, or that sort of thing, that you can just sort of put groups of people together, and it's really an outreach in that way. That's awesome.
Even with children, I too have had a cappella learning curve that hasn't quite suited me. But with the little kids, it's like, okay, we can do this kind of thing. I'll record. You put your headset on. Different kids can have each side of the earbud, and they can record in. And it's something fun for them, and hopefully not too stressful for their parents. And it's like, yay, we are still the church right now. Just because we're in different houses doesn't mean we aren't the church, and we're still connecting with each other.
Somebody in the congregation reached out to me specifically after the last little virtual children's group that I did. It had I think 12 kids sent in things, and it was just very sweet. And she said, I always love when the children sing, and usually live it's like a big clump of 30 kids. It's just a nice size group. But she said, but on the screen, she said, I could see every single one of their little faces. And she said, I felt so blessed by that. It's different than seeing a clump of kids from a group and being like, oh, where's my child or my grandchild, is maybe up there. And so it's interesting how we're seeing things differently. People have remarked to me that one of the good things about the whole virtual choir thing is, again, normally in the sanctuary, they sort of see people doing music from afar, unless they're really, sitting in the front row or something. But here you get a nice shot of what's happening with people's faces. And so I think that's great. I wanted to kind of go back to talking about how we define success, because I think it's not just about how the director of music, adjusts their perspective, but what is the environment like at the church? How do volunteers define and understand what is possible and successful now? What about your pastor or other church leadership, or colleagues? How do we communicate that the benchmark has changed? So that, and hopefully we're in a supportive situation, but so that we're all on the same page. And essentially, I guess what I'm asking is sort of managing expectations while still communicating positivity and potential for new opportunities and growth.
I've been really lucky in that I've been in a situation where everyone is just very open to new ideas and not being stuck in the way things have to be. So it's been very easy for me to just go and say, well, we could try to do it this way, or what about this idea? What about this idea? And it's actually viewed as exciting I guess, rather than, oh, that can't work. That's not the way that we've always done it, which is that mindset that you can sometimes come up against. So, I mean, I think that my advice to just any person that's going to deal with either their administration or their SVRC or their ministers that maybe, aren't quite in the same place is to have a very clear idea of what can happen. I don't think that we have the luxury of waiting around for someone to give us a step-by-step instruction for how to do it. We ourselves need to be the leaders and say, okay, well, these are the parameters. So what can happen? And to really be creative and brainstorm all those things, and then bring those things to your administrator instead of what I feel like has been the culture in some places so far, which is to say, oh gosh, we have all this information. There are these recommendations of all the things that we can't do. And you give your administration, who may not have as much idea about what you can do in your job, I guess the leisure to say, oh, well, we're going to cut this program, or we're going to cut your position, or we're not sure that there's anything for you to do, which I have seen happen, and that's very sad. So for you to be your own sort of empowerment and an advocate for your program and for your art form, and say, these are all the things that we can do, but you've got to be the one that's generating the ideas and bringing them to people, rather than waiting for someone to tell you what you can do, if that makes any sense. I think
absolutely.
So far. Yeah.
A few weeks into this, when it became clear that we're sort of in this situation for an indefinite period of time, I'm really fortunate here at this location to have a staff of really great musicians that we work together as a team. And I said, listen, we've been emailing. We need to just all be of one mind and figure out, what is our vision? We had a vision before. We've articulated the vision. We wrote it down. We shared it with people. And it seems clear to me that we've got to rethink what that is right now. And so we did have to come up with, this is our pandemic vision, pandemic version, right? The pandemic version of the vision. What is it? Because I think once you are all on the same page, then you can move forward. But if, your supervisor or volunteers that are heavily invested in what you're doing, they have a completely different concept of what it is, or they're still thinking along the old lines, I think that's, you can head that off at a pass, I think. And I think that communication is essential.
I think a lot of this comes back to, well, what can I do? What can we do? What can my volunteers do? What can I do as leader? And I'm thinking about that, especially we were just talking about virtual choir, and so much of that is reliant on people working full time and actually having the time to do these kinds of things. But there are so many things you can do in a part-time situation. I've had plenty of jobs where I was 10 hours a week. I know what that's like. That's not a lot of time, actually. 10 hours is not a lot. And I have told a number of pastors, no, don't ask your choir director to do virtual choir. You hire them for 8 hours. No. sorry guys. So I'm trying to advocate there. But I really think that we have to think about, well, what can we do? If I've got 8 hours a week, how can I advocate for myself? How can I imagine doing something differently? And I don't want to say not grieve, because I think there is so much that we have to grieve right now. But grieving is different from wallowing in it, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
We don't have to stay in our sorrow. We don't have to sit there in the mud and just never get back up again. We can eventually get back up again and start dreaming the future, to have that pandemic vision, to imagine what are my volunteers up for right now? Maybe I'm a volunteer. Maybe I'm the volunteer music director. What can I do with the time that I have and live into this season that God has us in?
Having you mentioned that about grief, it makes me think about, how our faith, our very faith, shapes our mindset during this time. And for me, I just feel like I think about this is a good way to make connection. My the sermon 2 weeks ago by one of our pastors, I think speaks to this perfectly. She really likes math, and she called her sermon "Solving for X," and basically it was all about the constant and the variables, and thinking about what is constant. Our faith is constant. All these other variables are things that we can't necessarily control. And so when I think about my faith, I think about the constant, right? And I lean on that. But I also think about letting go and sort of accepting the fact that there are, and I mean, I'll be the first to admit, I like to be able to control things. I feel safe, right? But there's a lot obviously that we can't control right now, and just saying those words out loud makes me feel lighter. So how do you lean on your faith during this time? How does your faith impact your perspective on, for example, your workflow or your priorities?
I've had this life. I've been thinking about this recently. It's like, this is sort of the latest. I didn't have global pandemic on my bingo card, but just speaking of resiliency and faith and all of that kind of stuff, I've had so many things that were outside of my control kind of shove me from here to there, to a bunch of places, and it happens pretty frequently and pretty violently. Every 1 to 2 years. So I was due. It was about 2 years since I started my new job in January. So if you're looking for someone to blame, so there's just been a constant thing in my life of this change, but that sometimes there are gifts in the change. So one of the things about having faith is having faith that there is going to be some sort of, as we said, new growth, some sort of opportunity that is coming out of the change, and that even though there are sad things, there are also good things that can be gleaned from it, from the side, and looking for those things and looking for the ways that it can be different, but maybe better, or push us forward a little bit more. I also think a big part of my faith has to do with helping people. To me, a call to music ministry or any sort of ministry is at least in part a call to some sort of social action, and the idea of loving your neighbor. And at the most fundamental level for us right now, as people who are stewards and caretakers of other people, is how do we love our neighbor? And part of that is keeping them safe. So balancing this idea of we really want it to be the way things were, with knowing that your first responsibility is to try to do the best by your choir and your at-risk folks. So how do you keep them safe by not rushing them back into a situation where they are in in-person worship, where they are singing right on top of each other, and also taking care of their grieving where they're sad that they're not singing. So it's a kind of a lot of stuff in there, but just the idea that my faith means that I take care of other people's, and how does that inform the way that I connect, as you said, or interact with them through the music ministry right now.
We can also see that in other people. Like the Mr. Rogers line, look for the helpers. We can see that in other folks, and I'm seeing this in wonderful ways in online spaces. I mean, we've got resources like this one. Here we are giving our time and our energy, our emotional labor to produce this kind of content for our colleagues. And so many people in our virtual world are sharing these wonderful resources. And it's coming, I think, mostly out of a heart of love. And to me, that means I'm seeing the image of God in them. I'm seeing God when I see them in what they're making and what they're giving to others. I'm also thinking about, I work in a United Church of Christ congregation, and for that denomination, one of the lines is, God is still speaking, and, the Holy Spirit is leading us through this season. And I don't know where the Holy Spirit is leading us. It goes where it will, right? And and I feel like for me, living in faith is walking with the Spirit when I don't know where that is. And frankly, we never know where that is. We just think that we know where it is, right?
Well said. So we've talked a little bit about, how we're doing things now. It's sort of the summertime. For some congregations, that sort of can be a quieter time to begin with. I know in the summertime, my choir, we do away with our weekly evening rehearsals and we just show up on Sundays and we sing. And then in August, we sort of we are on hiatus in August. But thinking about the fall, have you started to formulate a plan for how you will choir in the fall? Like what is that going to be for each of you? I'm curious.
So the elephant in the room that y'all can't see is the very, very big pregnant belly that I have. So yes, I have done a lot of planning in a way that I wouldn't necessarily recommend for other people, because most of us can adapt 2 weeks out. Most of us can, but I'm going to be sleepless, and probably my executive function is going to suck this fall. So doing a lot of planning, and a couple things that I think are maybe relevant, hopefully to more people than just like in my circumstance, is I'm really thinking about this in terms of having a flow chart. Like, if option B is what's happening, then here's what's going to happen in music. If we're in person, this. If we're not in person. If we're in person and we can't sing. And all these different options. And the options are not finite. Initially, I had this feeling of like, I have to plan all the things. And I'm like, no, I have to plan like 4 options. I can do this. I'm a planner. I can figure this out, right? And with choir in particular, I am thinking about, I'm eagerly awaiting news and technological developments that mean we can safely sing in person. Mm-hmm. I hope that the people who are really tech savvy and all those inventors are working on it just night and day. Good for them. That's not what I'm doing right now. What I'm thinking about is, how do I encourage the musicianship of my choir, and how do I encourage the connections? So the connection there, but also musicianship. We haven't done in the spring. We didn't continue with our regular weekly rehearsals. We've done a lot of virtual choir stuff, and we've done a lot of connection, but we haven't done a lot of, singing with each other. And so for the fall, even when I'm not there for people who are leading in my absence, we're going to be doing a lot of vocalizing, and even to the point of kind of sort of individualized vocal lessons, because I have a number of staff singers. The ratio to staff and volunteers is pretty good. So we can, even on a Zoom call, if that's all that we can do, if that's all that's safe to do, we can still spend our Thursday night rehearsals doing actual vocal training, which even if that's the only singing people do for the whole week, great. They did some vocal training. And I think, you might say, oh, well, Sarah, that's great for you because you have staff singers. Well, all of us who are directing a choir are perfectly well equipped to lead vocalizing, to lead different kinds of exercises in a Zoom call. Make sure everybody mutes themselves, but you can lead them through that. And normally when we're doing choir, at least as I've experienced it, we don't have a lot of time because Sunday is coming and the next anthem and the next anthem and the next anthem, right? But right now, like that's not where most of us are in terms of our church ministry. So we can really get down into the mechanics of how we're vocalizing, how we're singing. Maybe for some choirs, this is the time to help the half of your choir that doesn't know how to read music. Maybe this is the time. That's not the particular choir that I lead. But if that's your choir and you're like, okay, I'm part-time and I want to justify my work, or you just want to help people because you're a helper, well, now is a time when we can do that. Mm-hmm. Karen, I'm curious, like what you're thinking about.
Well, the idea that you said about going with the flow, and because we really don't know. Everybody's saying this phrase, but the virus dictates the timeline and the process of what everybody's going to be doing. So if we get to the fall and it's still huge outbreak, and there's just no way for anybody to gather safely, or if it's declining a little bit and maybe some people can come out. Those are a couple of different thoughts. But I see no possible sort of way forward in the fall without some sort of a hybrid instruction. I conduct a choir of about 30, and some of them are not at-risk folks. A lot of them are for various reasons, and probably shouldn't be coming out even if there is, by some miracle, a decline. So I would see some sort of a hybrid instruction where we do exactly what you're talking about with the Zoom call, and I'm going to be coming up with some sort of a curriculum where we look at music history, church music history, maybe some sort of, I'm very big into like multicultural music. So how music fits into worship in different cultures, or how music from different cultures can inform the way that we deal with our own music, reading, vocalizing. I have a staff singer that has offered to help people with things like support breathing, so we can do Zoom lessons on things like that. I actually last week had them brainstorm things that they would like to learn about if we were in a situation where at least most of us, if not all of us, couldn't sing together, and the majority of the choir was gathered in a Zoom call. Because you will have those 83-year-old folks too that realize that maybe they shouldn't be bopping around right now, and they're not going to participate in choir even if you have you rotate through small groups, which is one of my other ideas. Actually in a space or anything like that. And you want, again, connections. They need to be kept involved. That's their community. So they shouldn't be shut out of any sort of participation just because they are going through chemo, or because they are above the age of, 65 or anything like that. So, they're all important, and we want to keep them all engaged. I'm blessed with a bigger space. So there is, for everything that we know now, there is a potentiality that we could put maybe 4 people in extreme corners of the room, and have them sing from, they'd be 30 to 50 feet away from anybody, let alone 15, and do some sort of repertoire that would suit itself to that, whether it's aleatoric, whether it's very simple homorhythmic stuff that I can conduct standing in the middle. That there might be some potentiality to do some things like that as well too. But again, I think it all depends on the prevalence of the virus in your community before we decide to bring anybody out in any sort of numbers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Two things that have been on my mind. First of all, we've got a really great handbell ensemble ministry here at the church. And I feel like this is a great time to focus on that, because, there are people, we might not be able to do choir, but some of the choir members now have expressed an interest in joining a beginning handbell group and learning how to ring. Because, you could have a few masked masked ringers appropriately spaced apart and very safely ring some music. And so we have now started some development. I mean, we have a graded program to begin with, but these are for, adults who maybe they already read music. They've been singing in choir. They just don't know anything about handbell technique, and what's a quick way for us to get them kind of ringing and doing things like that. So we're focusing on that for now, because that coincides with, every church is doing something different, it seems. The United Methodist Church in Virginia is very limited in what it's offering in person right now. Our particular church is offering some very small prayer services with very limited numbers and no live music presently. So, we're not to that point where we would have live music in a service yet, but we're thinking ahead about that. The other thing is, I asked my choir, I said, if we can't sing on Thursday nights, what else would you want to do? And would you be interested in a study? Could we learn about the Psalms together? Could we use that to listen to music that is maybe this, now here is this Psalm, here is a modern interpretation a modern piece that we've sung, maybe, or maybe it's a contemporary Christian piece that it's this psalm. Do you hear it? It's the same psalm, right? And just having sort of a fun time enjoying music and doing Bible study at the same time. So we've thought about those kind of things as well. And I plan to keep up with, maybe a monthly virtual choir that is a large group thing, and then smaller projects along the way, and working in instrumentalists and things. For our congregation, we only recently put in screens in our sanctuary. We have a very traditional sanctuary, but we do have screens now. And I think once we do start to attend in person, that's a very good way to show pre-recorded music segments, to continue doing, virtual choir or digital offerings somehow in a safe way. So that's
a way to see folks in the congregation who can't be there in person.
Right.
You can still see them in that medium.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, we've talked a lot about technology, and my hope is that the people who are watching who've been hesitant or intimidated to learn a new skill, video editing, audio editing, or whatever, will be encouraged to just get their feet wet and move forward with that. But my hope is also that throughout this discussion, if you are in sort of a low tech situation, just by the nature of maybe you serve a very small congregation, or whatever your situation is, that we've given you some other ideas for how you can reach out. One simple thing is when we produce the hymns now, I record the organist, and then I lay in a soloist SATB part. So we have a quartet singing the hymns, and that's how we do the hymns. And then I'm using this is all possible because of technology, of course. I'm laying in a PowerPoint above it that shows the actual music, so people can see the hymn. So we've been presenting the hymns that way. But even though the music's on the screen and everything, people still love to have a hymnal. And so I've set up a hymnal delivery program.
Oh.
So I'm bringing hymnals to people. They're signing one out so they can have one at home. It's simple. It's a way for them to feel connected to their church. So if you can think of little things that are meaningful like that, it doesn't have to be a complex technical task. Ways to remain connected.
To me, so much of this comes back to, well, what is the vision here? What is the goal here? What are the values here? I feel like this whole time we've been talking about, here are the things that we're doing, but we keep coming back to, well, what's the point? And if the point is connection in your congregation, even someone who's part-time, someone who's volunteering, we can all think about, well, what does it mean for me to live into those values, for me to provide means of connection for the choir or what have you? We can all do that, even though it will look different.
Absolutely. And going back to that article that I mentioned from the APA at the very beginning of this discussion, they list these ways that you can develop or help yourself as you're developing resiliency. And I think it's interesting because now as I think about all of the things that we've covered in this discussion, I feel like they fit very clearly in with these suggestions. So I'm just going to read the little bullet points of what they are. Prioritize relationships is the first one. And I think, that's all we've been talking about here, is prioritizing relationships and remaining connected. Join a group. So for me, that translates to reach out and ask for help from my colleagues. Be affiliated with a group like ACDA or pastoral musicians or whatever, so that you can reach out to friends and be supported during this time as you try to maybe develop new skills, or you just need to be heard because maybe you're feeling frustrated or sad. Take care of your body. Haven't talked about that much. Probably it could be a whole other discussion, right? But how easy has it been during this pandemic time to maybe not get as much movement as we're used to? Avoid negative outlets. So that's a hard one right now, I think, in this time, is to avoid negativity, because I think we're confronted with it so regularly. In a way, we become numb to it. But I think, if you can try to maintain a positive attitude and surround yourself with positive people, that's going to help. Help others. That's another thing. Kind of get out of your own head and think, what are the needs of the congregation? What are the needs of the people that we're serving? Be proactive, move toward your goals. So that's take action, set some goals for yourself, maybe rework the vision for your music ministry, and then take action, communicate those goals to everybody who is invested in that, and then accept change, but maintain hope. So going back to talking about, back to talking about grieving, we lament, but at the end of the lament, there's hope. Inherent in lament is hope. So as we lament, let us remain hopeful. I wanted to just close this out. And I think a few of these things have popped up as we've discussed, but have there been areas of your ministry that have been enriched during this time? Like have actually grown or surprised you in terms of participation or just seeing something in a different way? I know we mentioned the alumni, the ability to bring people together in different combinations that are possible in real time. Any other surprises or positive things that you've experienced during this time that spur you on?
I think it's been a really interesting time of experimenting with reach and things that we may have thought that we might try someday. All of a sudden, someday is here, boom, and you have to do it right now. So we have found that our services, because we are live streaming, are reaching people that all over the country. And it's actually forming its own kind of little spiritual group, I guess. But our reach is much wider than it could be if it were just confined to who is able to get physically to worship in the walls of the church. We've been doing various things that have been successful that we wouldn't have thought to do before. I do a weekly, what I call #Music Monday kind of a thing, and I've been taking hymns. And a lot of it has been focused on hymns that can help us get through a difficult time. And some of it is actually I'm taking periodically. I see in their own words on your bookshelf, the spiritual things from that tradition, putting that into a historical. There, she's going to pull it out. There it comes. Into a historical.
If you don't have this book, friends,
get it.
You should get it.
Yes.
Google it.
Because it actually connects the African American spiritual tradition with people who were going through the experience of slavery at the time and how those songs might have fit in. So I do an education on that, and just 5 minutes. But so we may talk about. I'll talk about it for 2 minutes about either the hymn, the history of a hymn, how it fits in the culture, how it can help us in our current time, and then sing it. We put the words up there so that people can sing along at home if they so desire. And that has an incredible reach. I did a concert where I started a concert series at the church called a Love Your Neighbor concert series in person. And what it does is each concert benefits some ministry. And our last one had to get canceled because it was in the middle of March. So just a week or two ago, I did my own concert for that and raised money for Albuquerque Healthcare for the Homeless. So again, reaching people, and this went to people that I had in churches in Baton Rouge, people that I knew from childhood, the people that you're reaching that you would not have reached with these opportunities before is really just astounding. So, the widening of scope has been an unexpected gift, I think.
Yeah, I mean, to the point where just in a meeting yesterday, our senior pastor said, even when we hope things return to whatever the new normal is, We were not a church that streamed or sent out video of our services prior to this situation. We know that that's going to continue now. I mean, that's now a part of our worship offerings permanently because of exactly what you said. We have people now connected with us who don't live near the church and could not physically attend. Mm-hmm. So that's amazing. Sarah, how about you?
I think with that particular thing, I had always thought, we do a pretty decent job reaching out to church members who are in nursing homes or what have you.
Yeah.
And then now that we've been doing so much more, I realized, this is what we should have been doing all along to minister. So that's an enrichment for sure. And I'm also thinking back to these Zoom calls that we have every Sunday morning, the oasis in the week, as many of my choir members have termed them. It's been wonderful to get to know people in the choir better, to connect on a more personal level. Like, I have coffee with people in the choir. I'm very relational with people. But on Sunday morning, we're focused and we're going to do the things, and we need to get that retard just right. And this is like, we get to have this season where we have really intentional time to connect with each other. And we wish we were singing, but this is also really wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that brings our session to a close. And
thank you for having us, Jessica.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank both of you. I know our time together has blessed me, and I hope that the people watching have gleaned, if nothing else, a little bit of encouragement and perspective from this conversation. We will be, providing a way to at least contact me or help people to get in touch with you following this conversation, should they have follow-up questions for you. And
I'm happy to be contacted. On my website, easy to contact.
Great. Yeah, we'll make all of that information available to the folks who are watching. And once again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. This has been great. I've got new ideas.